Daniel had seen strange skies before, warped orange sunsets on Mars Station, the violet haze of Titan's methane horizon, but nothing compared to the twin suns of Virelia. They poured molten light over a city of living crystal, casting rivers of gold and blood red across towers that seemed to grow straight from the planet's heart. The air itself shimmered, heavy with scents he couldn't name, electric and sweet. This was not Earth. This was her world. At the top of the ceremonial steps stood Lyra, the princess he had crossed the galaxy to marry. Her gown flowed like liquid silver, catching the light with every subtle movement. Her eyes, a deep, impossible violet flecked with silver fire, found him even from a distance, and in them he saw the same dangerous certainty that had drawn him here in the first place. Around them, thousands of Virelians watched in reverent silence, their translucent skin glistening under the twin suns. It wasn't just a wedding. It was a union between worlds that had nearly destroyed each other. 6 months ago, Daniel was still a negotiator on the Earth-Virelian peace talks, sworn to keep emotion out of diplomacy. That oath had lasted exactly 4 meetings with Lyra. Against reason, against advice, against the unspoken rules of interspecies politics, he had chosen her. And she, somehow, had chosen him. The ceremony began with rituals Daniel barely understood. Lyra's hand pressed against his chest, and he placed his palm against the glowing crest at her collarbone. A heat spread through him, not electrical, not mechanical, but alive. The crowd's collective breath seemed to synchronize with his own heartbeat. Virelian choirs sang in harmonies no human throat could produce. When the vows were spoken, they were sealed not with a kiss, but with an ancient branding, a burn mark pressed into their joined hands by a rod of glowing metal. It was both painful and grounding, an unmistakable reminder that this was real, permanent binding. By the time the chants died away and the suns slid lower toward the horizon, Daniel believed he understood the customs well enough to survive them. That belief lasted until the wedding night. The palace attendants led him through corridors carved from white crystal, past walls that pulsed faintly as if alive. They opened the final set of doors to reveal a chamber unlike anything he had ever seen, a massive round bed suspended in midair, curtains that shimmered like molten glass, a faint haze of luminescent mist curling along the floor. Lyra was there, waiting. But she wasn't alone. 2 women sat beside her, both unmistakably Virelian and impossibly beautiful. One had emerald green skin and hair black as midnight, her golden eyes steady and unblinking. The other was pale silver, her hair a cascade of light itself, her gaze softer but no less intense. They were dressed in the same ceremonial silks as Lyra, their markings glowing faintly in the dim light. Daniel froze at the threshold. His instincts as a diplomat screamed at him to hide his confusion, but his voice betrayed him. "Lyra, who are they?" Lyra's lips curved into the faintest smile. "My sisters," she said, her tone gentle but carrying an undercurrent he couldn't name. "Did you think you were marrying only me?" The green-skinned sister tilted her head, studying him like a rare artifact. The silver-haired one exchanged a glance with Lyra, and a subtle, knowing smile passed between them. Daniel's mind scrambled for an explanation. Cultural misunderstanding, ceremonial witnesses, anything that fit within the logic of the past 6 months. But the air between them was charged with something deeper. This was no formality. This was deliberate. The palace doors slid shut behind him with a soft hiss. The sisters didn't speak. Neither did Lyra. The silence was heavier than the alien air, thick with the unspoken truth that whatever had begun on the ceremonial steps outside had only just started here. And somewhere in the back of Daniel's mind, a quiet, unshakable thought took root. He hadn't just married into another world. He had stepped into the center of something far older, far stranger, and far more dangerous than love. Daniel didn't move at first. The 3 women before him watched with unnerving stillness, their eyes carrying that Virelian depth, an almost crystalline clarity that made it impossible to tell if they were judging, testing, or simply observing. Lyra broke the silence. "Daniel," she said, voice soft but commanding, "this is Vera and Sarah, my elder and younger sisters." The green-skinned one inclined her head slightly. Vera. Her gaze was sharp, as if she could strip truth from a man with a single look. Sarah, the silver-haired one, smiled faintly, her expression gentler but strangely distant, as though her mind was somewhere else entirely. Daniel stepped forward cautiously. His instincts told him to keep his posture neutral. Too much confidence could read as arrogance, too little as weakness. "I wasn't told," he said carefully, "that marriage to a Virelian princess included family participation." Vera's lips curved, but it wasn't quite a smile. "Some truths," she replied, "cannot be explained before they are lived." Sarah leaned forward, tilting her head like a curious bird. "And some traditions cannot be refused once begun." Lyra's eyes never left Daniel. "Tonight," she said, "is about more than you and me. You have married into my bloodline, Daniel. In Virelia, that bond extends to those who share it." He felt the weight of her words but couldn't quite decipher them. "You mean you three are?" Lyra's tone was steady. "Connected. In ways you will learn." The room itself seemed to lean in, its crystal walls humming faintly. Daniel realized the walls here weren't just decorative, they resonated with sound, carrying even the quietest whispers. The palace was listening. Lyra gestured to the bed, that strange, floating circle of silk and light. "Sit," she said. He hesitated but obeyed, lowering himself onto the edge. The surface molded to his form like warm water solidified. Vera moved to his left, her presence heavy, grounding. Sarah took his right, a coolness radiating from her that sent a subtle shiver through him. Lyra settled directly across, her posture regal yet intimate. Vera spoke first. "Our people have survived for centuries not by strength alone, but by knowing the hearts of those we trust." Her gaze pinned him. "You will be tested, Daniel of Earth." Sarah's voice was lighter, almost melodic. "Don't be afraid. Most pass." She glanced at Lyra. "Eventually." Daniel tried to steady his breathing. "Tested, how?" Lyra answered for them. "Not with weapons. Not with questions. With presence. With truth." The words were as cryptic as they were unsettling. Vera reached out, fingertips brushing the back of his hand. Her touch was warm, but it carried a subtle weight, like the pull of gravity in deep space. "We learn much through contact," she said, her voice low. "The body cannot lie the way the tongue can." Before he could respond, Sarah's cool fingers touched his other hand. The contrast in sensation was immediate, one side heat, the other frost. Daniel's pulse quickened, his mind flashing with memories unbidden, arguments in dim earth corridors, the cold of a shuttle's airlock, the warmth of Lyra's hand when she first touched him. He pulled in a breath. "What exactly are you doing?" Sarah's silver eyes glimmered. "Listening." Lyra finally leaned forward, her own hands joining theirs, completing the circle. The moment she did, the air shifted. A faint vibration thrummed through Daniel's bones, as if the room had dropped into a deeper frequency. "You feel it," Lyra said. It wasn't a question. Daniel did. A strange, wordless awareness began to seep into him, not thoughts, not voices, but impressions. A sharpness from Vera. A softness from Sarah. From Lyra, a steady, deliberate rhythm. Together, they formed something whole, something alien. It lasted only a few heartbeats before Lyra broke contact. The sudden absence left him strangely hollow. Vera's expression was unreadable. "He carries more scars than most," she said to Lyra. Sarah tilted her head. "But they're old scars. Not bleeding." Lyra studied him for a moment, her gaze deepening. "Then we will see if they hold, or break." Daniel exhaled slowly. "Is this what my wedding night is supposed to be?" Vera's lips twitched. "It's what your life will be." The sisters rose in unison, moving toward the far side of the room where a set of curved crystal doors shimmered faintly. Lyra remained seated, her eyes fixed on Daniel. "Rest," she said. "Tomorrow you begin the rites." "What rites?" he asked. Her smile was thin, almost sad. "The ones that decide if this marriage will survive." The sisters disappeared through the doors, leaving him alone with Lyra, and with 1,000 questions that felt heavier than any battlefield he had ever stood on. He looked at her, searching for something familiar in her expression. But all he found was the quiet certainty of someone who knew exactly how the game would be played, and exactly how high the stakes were. Outside, beyond the crystal walls, the twin suns dipped fully below the horizon, and the city of Virelia came alive with its nocturnal glow. The night had begun. And Daniel had the feeling it would not end until he was changed forever. Daniel woke to the sound of water, not the kind that drips or trickles, but a low, steady hum, like a river beneath stone. The chamber was dim, its walls alive with slow pulses of light that shifted between silver and green. Lyra stood at the far end of the room, dressed in a flowing robe of deep crimson. Beside her, Vera and Sarah moved silently, their garments matching hers in style but not in color, Vera's a dark forest hue, Sarah's pale like moonlight. "You're late," Vera said, though Daniel could have sworn he'd woken as soon as the light changed. Lyra stepped forward. "Today begins the rites. You'll learn our customs, and we will learn you." Daniel pushed himself upright. "And if I fail?" Sarah's tone was almost playful. "Then the marriage dissolves, and the alliance with it." The words carried more weight than her light voice suggested. This wasn't a test for romance. This was political, cultural, maybe even existential. The first ritual. They led him to a courtyard where the air smelled faintly of ozone. A circular basin sat at the center, its surface perfectly still. Lyra gestured for him to stand at its edge. "In Virelia," she explained, "water remembers." Vera handed him a small, translucent stone. "Drop it in. Then speak a truth you've never told another living being." Daniel frowned. "You can't be serious." Sarah's smile was cool. "If you lie, the water will reject you." He stared at the surface. His mind spun. What truth could he give that wouldn't be used against him later? He thought of his service years, of the decisions he'd made in war zones, of the one order he'd followed that had cost a dozen civilian lives. His hand tightened around the stone. He dropped it into the water. The ripple was slow, deliberate. "I regret obeying an order that killed people who didn't deserve it," he said. The water shivered, then glowed faintly. The sisters exchanged a glance, not hostile, but interested. Lyra's eyes softened. "The water accepts you." The second ritual. Next came the Hall of Mirrors. It was less a hall and more a living tunnel, its walls made of reflective crystal that shifted shape when he moved. Lyra explained that each reflection revealed a piece of the self unseen by others. "Walk to the other end," she said, "without closing your eyes." It sounded simple. It wasn't. The first reflection was him as he knew himself, weary, determined. The next, him as he might have been, younger, smiling, untouched by war. Then came darker versions, him with eyes cold as stone, him turning away from someone in need, him standing over a battlefield with blood on his hands. Each step felt heavier. The air thickened. By the time he reached the end, his breath was ragged. Sarah tilted her head. "And which one is the real you?" "All of them," he answered. Vera's expression was unreadable, but her tone was softer than before. "That is the correct answer." The third ritual. Night had fallen by the time they brought him to the Tower of Silence. From its top, the whole crystal city glowed beneath the twin moons. Lyra stood beside him, the wind catching her hair. "This is the last rite for today," she said. "You must share silence with us. If your mind wanders, we will know." He almost laughed. Silence was easy. But as they stood together, the stillness wasn't empty. It pressed against him, pulling thoughts to the surface, doubts, fears, memories. He realized they weren't just being quiet, they were linked somehow. He could feel the emotional weight of each sister, like faint echoes in the back of his mind. Vera's sharp focus, Sarah's calm detachment, Lyra's steady resolve, all of it bled into him, mingling with his own emotions. By the time they ended the silence, Daniel's chest felt tight, his pulse faster than before. Back in the chamber, he collapsed onto the suspended bed, exhausted. Lyra sat beside him, her expression thoughtful. "You're adapting faster than I expected," she said. "Is that good?" he asked. "It means you might survive what's coming," Vera said from the doorway. Sarah leaned against the wall, her silver hair catching the dim light. "Or it means we need to push harder." Daniel looked between them. "You call these rituals. I call them tests." "They are both," Lyra replied. "But remember, Daniel, passing today doesn't mean you've won. It just means you've been invited to face tomorrow." That night, as the sisters left him alone with Lyra, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that each ritual wasn't just about him. The way they watched him, the way they spoke in subtle, unspoken agreement, it was as if they were searching for something very specific. And in his gut he knew, whatever it was, he either had it, or they'd break him until they found it. Daniel had grown used to the Crystal Palace's strange hum, a constant vibration beneath the skin, like the faint pulse of a machine far below. But tonight it was different. The air was too still, the silence too deliberate. He lay awake on the suspended bed, staring at the ceiling where threads of light swirled slowly in intricate patterns. Lyra had left earlier, saying she was needed for family matters. Vera and Sarah had gone with her. He wasn't told when they'd return. He wasn't told anything at all. An hour passed before he heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping against the wall. Not mechanical. Intentional. He rose silently, moving toward the sound. The floor under his feet felt warmer than usual. The tapping stopped. Then a soft, crystalline shimmer filled the air, a sound that didn't come from the room itself, but from inside his head. Daniel froze. It was voices. Not spoken, not heard, but inside. Vera's voice was sharp, controlled. "He's resilient. Stronger than the last one." Sarah's reply was softer, with a trace of doubt. "Strength isn't enough. The bond will break if he cannot merge." Lyra entered the conversation, her tone low but unyielding. "He will. I chose him for that reason." Vera again. "You chose him because you wanted him. That's not the same." Sarah's thought brushed Daniel's mind like cold wind. "He hears us." Daniel's chest tightened. He backed away from the wall, every instinct telling him to run, but his feet stayed rooted. Lyra's voice, inside his skull, was suddenly clear, directed at him. "If you can hear us, then the first barrier is gone." The shimmer faded. The voices dissolved. The air was silent again. He didn't sleep after that. When morning came, Lyra entered the chamber as if nothing had happened. She wore deep blue ceremonial robes, her hair bound in a way that exposed the silver crest at her collarbone. "You heard us," she said without preamble. Daniel didn't answer. Vera appeared in the doorway, arms folded. "We didn't intend for it to happen so soon. But it's done." Sarah slipped in behind her, smiling faintly. "The merge has started." Daniel's voice was steady, but only barely. "You were inside my head." Lyra's gaze didn't waver. "That is what the rites are for. The bond between us is not merely symbolic. It is shared existence." Vera stepped closer. "When you marry into our bloodline, you join it, not just in law or tradition, but in thought. In instinct. In memory." Daniel's pulse quickened. "So this was never about love." Lyra's tone softened. "It was about survival. For both our worlds." They led him through a narrow corridor Daniel hadn't seen before. The walls here were darker, the crystal denser, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. At the end stood a tall archway carved with unfamiliar glyphs. "This," Sarah explained, "is the Whisper Gate. Through it, thoughts cannot hide." Daniel frowned. "Sounds like a nightmare." "Only if you're unworthy," Vera said. They stepped through together. The air on the other side was cooler, heavier. Daniel felt a pressure building at the base of his skull, not pain, but presence. And then it began. Memories that weren't his flickered in his mind's eye. Vera standing on a cliff of black stone as a storm tore the skies open, Sarah drifting in an endless ocean of silver waves, Lyra kneeling over someone's body, her hands stained in a deep blue that was not human blood. The visions came faster. His own memories bled into theirs, flashes of Earth battlefields, childhood streets, the day he first saw Lyra across a crowded hall. It was overwhelming, like drowning in 3 minds at once. But through the chaos, he felt something else, an anchor. Lyra's presence, holding him steady. When it was over, he was on his knees, breathing hard. Lyra crouched in front of him, her hand warm against his cheek. Now you understand why most fail. Merging isn't just about trust. It's about surviving the truth of another being. Daniel's voice was hoarse. And if I can't? Vera answered without hesitation. Then you'll die. And so will the treaty. Back in his chamber, Daniel sat alone for hours. The merging wasn't complete. He could still feel faint threads connecting him to them, tugging at his thoughts. Every so often, he'd hear a whisper, too faint to catch. He understood now why the palace felt alive. It wasn't just stone and crystal. It was a vessel for their bond, built to carry it, protect it, or destroy it. And in that moment, he realized the sisters weren't just testing if he was worthy of Lyra. They were testing if he was worthy of all of them. Daniel had thought the rituals were difficult. The Basin of Truths, the Hall of Mirrors, the merging at the Whisper Gate. But what awaited him now was something entirely different. The sisters met him in the Dawn Hall, a vast chamber open to the twin suns, its floor carved with concentric circles of inlaid crystal. The light refracted through the walls, breaking into streams of shifting color that danced across their faces. Lyra stood at the center, her expression unreadable. Vera paced slowly along the edge of the circle, her gaze sharp and assessing. Sarah leaned against a column, her eyes half-lidded, calm in a way that felt deliberate. This, Lyra began, is the final rite before the bond is sealed. We call it the trial of loyalty. Daniel's jaw tightened. Loyalty to you? Vera stopped pacing. To all of us. To the bond. To what it demands. Sarah's voice was almost a whisper. And to what it will take from you. The first phase, temptation. They brought forward a figure Daniel recognized instantly, Jalen, one of Earth's envoys, dressed in the formal white of diplomatic service. He looked unharmed, but his eyes were wide with confusion. Lyra gestured to him. He was found near the palace gates, seeking you. Jalen stepped forward. Daniel, you have to come back. Earth's command is worried. They think you're being manipulated. I can get you out, tonight. The urge to respond was immediate. Jalen was a friend from the war, a man who had saved Daniel's life twice. The idea of walking out, of escaping this place before its web tightened any further, was like a breath of air in drowning lungs. Lyra's gaze bore into him. If you step outside these walls now, the bond will collapse. The alliance will end. You must choose, the safety of your own kind, or the vow you made. Daniel's pulse thundered. This wasn't a simple choice between worlds. It was a choice between the life he'd known and the one he'd stepped into without fully understanding. He met Jalen's eyes. I can't leave. Jalen's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He simply turned and was led away. The second phase, betrayal. Vera stepped into the circle, holding something small in her palm, a metal shard etched with human military codes. This was found in your quarters, she said. Explain it. Daniel's stomach dropped. He knew the shard. It was a fragment of a classified transmitter, a relic from his last mission before the treaty. He hadn't placed it here, but his denial would sound like exactly that. I didn't bring it, he said firmly. Sarah stepped closer, her cool presence brushing against his thoughts. If you lie, the merge will show it. Daniel forced himself to keep his mind steady. The truth was simple, it wasn't his. He let them read it in him. A flicker passed between the sisters, some silent exchange he couldn't follow. Then Vera closed her fist around the shard and stepped back. Truth holds. For now. The final phase, the cut. Lyra drew a slender blade from her robe, its edge gleaming with a silver light. She held it between them. In our law, loyalty is sealed with sacrifice, she said. One of us will bear a wound. You must choose who. Daniel's breath caught. Why? Vera answered. Because pain shared in the bond becomes pain shared in the self. If you cannot bear another's wound, you cannot protect them. Sarah added softly. And if you choose wrongly, the bond fractures. Daniel looked between them. Each face gave nothing away. His instincts screamed at him to choose Lyra, his wife, but something deeper told him that this wasn't about favoritism. It was about trust. He turned to Vera. You. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she stepped forward without hesitation. Lyra pressed the blade against her forearm, drawing a thin line of glowing blue blood. Daniel felt it instantly, a sharp, searing pain in his own arm, as real as if the cut had been made on him. Vera didn't flinch. Neither did he. Lyra nodded. The bond holds. When it was over, the sisters withdrew, leaving Daniel standing alone in the circle. His arm still burned, the echo of Vera's wound pulsing with each heartbeat. Lyra returned last, her expression softer now. You've passed, she said. Not perfectly. Not without doubt. But enough. Daniel exhaled slowly. And now? No, she said. You're one of us. That night, as they shared the chamber, Daniel realized the test hadn't been about proving love or loyalty to Lyra alone. It had been about proving he could carry all of them, their trust, their pain, their survival. And somewhere deep in the palace, he could feel the bond tightening, and something else, darker, waiting just beyond the next horizon. The morning after the trial of loyalty was unnervingly calm. Daniel woke to the soft hum of the palace's crystal walls and the faint glow of the twin suns spilling into the chamber. The burn in his arm, Vera's wound, was still there, tender but bearable. It was a reminder of the choice he'd made, and of the bond that now tethered him to all three sisters. Lyra sat near the balcony, draped in loose silks, her gaze fixed on the city below. You slept, she said, not turning. Barely, he replied. You'll need the rest. He frowned. For what? Before she could answer, the chamber doors slid open. Vera entered first, her arm bound in a thin band of metallic weave. Sarah followed, carrying a tray of food, though Daniel doubted she'd prepared it herself. It wasn't until the third figure stepped through that his pulse spiked. She was taller than any of the sisters he'd met, her skin a deep bronze laced with faint gold markings that shifted when she moved. Her eyes were a piercing shade of amber, bright and unblinking. Her hair, black with streaks of molten gold, fell in waves down her back. Lyra rose slowly. Daniel, this is Kayla. The newcomer stepped forward with a soldier's precision. Fourth born of our bloodline, she said, her voice low but carrying an edge like sharpened glass. Daniel's gaze flicked between the sisters. Fourth born? Vera's tone was as flat as ever. You didn't think we were the only ones, did you? Sarah placed the tray down and smiled faintly. The rites you've passed, they were for us. The next are for her. Kayla circled him once, like a predator assessing prey. I've heard you survived the merge. That you didn't break. She stopped in front of him, tilting her head slightly. We'll see if that's true. Daniel tried to keep his voice steady. What exactly are you testing now? Lyra answered instead. Our bond isn't complete until it extends to all of us. And there are more than 3 sisters in this line. How many? He asked. No one replied. Later that day, Daniel found himself walking through a wing of the palace he'd never seen before. The air here was warmer, almost heavy, and the walls weren't made of the usual pale crystal. They were dark, shot through with veins of glowing gold. Kayla led the way, Vera and Sarah flanking him, Lyra just behind. No one spoke. They entered a chamber that felt older than the palace itself. Symbols carved deep into the walls pulsed faintly, responding to their presence. In the center stood a low platform, its surface covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift if he looked at them too long. This is where the bloodline is kept whole, Kayla said. It's where you'll face the rest of us, Daniel scanned the room. The rest? From the shadows at the far end, figures began to emerge, not one, not two, but 4 more women. Each bore the same unmistakable bloodline features, the eyes, the markings, but each was entirely unique. One's skin shimmered like polished obsidian, another's hair floated as if underwater, a third's hands glowed faintly at the fingertips, and the last had eyes like a starfield, dark and infinite. 7 in total. Lyra moved to his side. You've proven you can carry the bond with 3. Now you must carry it with all 7. If you fail. She didn't finish the sentence, but Daniel didn't need her to. He could feel the weight of it in his chest. Vera's voice cut the silence. Each of us will test you differently. Some will try to break your mind. Others will test your body. And one, she glanced at Kayla, will try to see if your heart can hold. Sarah smiled faintly. No human has passed all 7. Daniel swallowed hard. What happens if I do? Lyra's eyes softened, but there was a shadow behind them. Then you become something no human has ever been. As the 7 sisters formed a circle around him, the air in the chamber thickened. The markings on the walls glowed brighter, and the floor beneath him began to hum with the same resonance he'd felt during the merge, only now it was stronger, deeper, almost violent in its intensity. Daniel's pulse quickened. The bond threads he'd felt before with Lyra, Vera, and Sarah began to tug again, and now more threads reached for him from the others. It wasn't just connection. It was invasion. Kayla stepped forward, her gaze locking onto his. This is the first step, she said. When it's over, you'll either be one of us, or you won't be at all. The chamber doors slammed shut, sealing them in. And Daniel realized, with chilling certainty, that the wedding had never truly been the beginning. It had been the invitation.